This is Dan Mechem. My father and I have joined, so we're excited and looking forward to this.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for everyone attending to this evening. I want to say a couple things about your father, Dan. We've never met, but I've observed him from a distance, and I also received a letter from him last fall, which I'll share with the group. As you know, the Golf Heritage Society is reliant upon donations and memberships because we're a nonprofit corporation. Last fall, I was the host of the national convention at Latrobe Country Club last year. And it was the first time that the Golf Heritage Society came to Western Pennsylvania. So we wanted to do it at Arnie's place. And your father sent a gracious letter to me. And he said in the letter, he was trying to decide whether he wanted to be a lifetime benefactor, which is the largest donation, or an annual benefactor. And his letter to me stated, he goes, "Bob, I'm 91 years old. I better choose the annual benefactor category because I don't know how long I'm going to live." So he made a very generous donation.
Beautiful.
I also frequently go to the memorial in Columbus, Ohio every year, and mainly because I'm a Jack Nicklaus fan. And for the last 20 years, I've been taking my kids, I've been taking my wife, and they all roll their eyes because it's something Dad wants to do. And so I go, and the best day to go is on Wednesday when they have the honoree ceremony. And I got to witness your father for the last 20 years serve as master of ceremonies. And he does a tremendous job. I think he gave up those duties recently.
Yeah.
But for 20 years, he sat side by side with Jack Nicklaus, all of the honorees, everybody, the who's who of golf up on stage. And he ran that show and he did it impressively. And it was something to behold. So
great.
Congratulations to your father on that as well.
Thank you.
And finally, most of us probably can recount in 2016 when Mr. Palmer passed away. They held the ceremony at the Basilica at St. Vincent in Latrobe. And for all of our viewers this evening, Mr. Charlie Mechem was one of the individuals who eulogized Arnie on television at the ceremony in the church, sitting right beside the Palmer family and the Nicklaus family. So Charlie's an impressive person. I'm just giving you a little taste of who he is before his son introduces him, but he is a leader. He's a pillar in the golf community. And we're so happy to have him this evening.
Thank you so much, everybody. We're honored to be here. Thank you. I wish that we could be right next to you, but I guess we're used to this Zoom world. So I'm Dan Mechem. I'm Charlie's only son. Don't hold that against me. But my father, just to give you a brief background on him that predates some of the things you were just mentioning, started his career as a lawyer, went to Yale Law School, practiced law at a law firm called Taft, Stettinius and Hollister, and then ultimately became the CEO and chairman of Taft Broadcasting, which, among other things, owned Hanna-Barbera, owned WTVN in Columbus, WKRC in Cincinnati, a lot of stations. And just fast forwarding, was on lots of boards, but eventually became LPGA Commissioner. And then shortly thereafter was Arnold Palmer's business advisor for quite some time. And as Dad will relate, he also in parallel had a lot of business dealings with Jack Nicklaus, in part because of, if you guys know Kings Island, the amusement park that Dad's company built, they had a golf course that Nicklaus designed across the highway. So but this book, Dad will talk about it now. I'll just interview him, is I know a labor of love for him. Dad's written two books prior to this that have done well. I guess I'll start by asking Dad, what was the impetus behind writing this book, and why at age 91 did you want to do it?
I want to start by saying that your society is extremely important, and you do what you do very well. I said, as I grow older, I realize how time is cruel to many people, places, and things that are largely forgotten. I've always said, as a matter of fact, I bet if you went on the street today and asked 25 people, what does the name Dwight David Eisenhower mean to you? About 23 of them would say, never heard of him. It happens. So your challenge, your mission is preserving what's good and great about the game. And that's why I was happy to be associated with you, even though at 92, I may not have a lot of annual memberships left, but we'll hope they last a while. The book started in this way. I belonged to a club out in California, where one day the president of the club said, Charlie, you may be one of the very few people in the world that knew Arnold and Jack both intimately at the same time. And I said, well, that may be true. And he said, I'd like you to make a talk to the membership of the club in which you explain that and share a few stories. So I did that, and the talk went well, and I was urged then to write a book. And that's what I've done. It basically are memories that I've carried over a lot of years of Jack and Arnie, and share stories that I don't think anyone else knows. The book will be released in another 4 or 5 weeks. I think John has arranged for you all to have access to the book, and we'll certainly be honored to provide those. There's no chronology or necessary order of the stories in the book. I just sort of wrote them down as I thought about them. And so they kind of go all over the lot, but I'll share a few with you in a minute. The people often ask, well, how did you meet Arnold and Jack? Well, quite differently. Jack designed a golf course for my company just north of Cincinnati, Ohio in 1970. He and I have known one another now for 52 years, and we've been friends all along and done a lot of things together. Arnie and I met in a different way. Arnie and I met when I was with the LPGA, and when I finished, he asked me if I would join him at his office in Bay Hill and act as his consultant and advisor, which I happily did for another 10 years. So those are the reasons why the book exists. And I'll give you maybe a good example of the kind of stories that are in it and why I think it's worth your reading. I'll give you 2 or 3 stories among my favorites. I don't want you to tell anybody about these because then they won't buy the book. So I want to be sure that this stays within your group. The first story is maybe my favorite. When I was sharing an office with Arnie at Bay Hill, every 6 or 7 weeks, I would drive down I-95 and visit with Jack, who had his office in North Palm Beach. And one day I was getting ready to go, and I said, Arnie, I'm going to see Jack tomorrow. And he said, give him my best. So the next day I said hello to Jack, and I said, Arnie sends his regards. And he said, oh, how's he doing? I said, Jack, he's just doing fine. And Jack said to me, Charlie, does he really play golf every day? And I said, believe it or not, yes, he does, either in the shootout or on the range or in a tournament. He just sort of shook his head. So the next day I go back and I say, Arnie, Jack sends his best. And he said, oh, I'm glad to hear from him. How's he getting along? And I said, he's doing fine. And he said, does he play much golf? And I said, actually, Arnie, he's not playing very much. He has a number of other things he enjoys doing. Arnie looked me straight in the face, totally seriously, and said, then Charlie, what in the hell does he do all day long? I've never forgotten that story, because Arnie, golf was his life, his breath, his everything. Jack had other interests, but with Arnie, there was only golf. A second story that I think exemplifies Arnie, you may remember some years back, a player, and I don't even want to name him, laid up at Augusta when he was leading the tournament. He laid up on both 13 and 15 and ended up losing the tournament, not because he played 13 and 15 badly, but because he didn't get an eagle or a birdie. So the next day, I'm having lunch with Arnie, and I said, Arnie, what'd you think of that? And he kind of shook his head. And I said, did you ever lay up at Augusta? And he looked at me and he said, Charlie, you know how many times I've come in second at Augusta? And I said, no, I don't. He said, neither do I. And that was Arnie. The first is the only thing that mattered. Second didn't count. And one third story, Tim Fincham called me one day. You remember Tim was the commissioner of the PGA Tour. And he said, Charlie, I need your help. And I broke out laughing. I said, Tim, this is an historic moment, because I don't know when the commissioner of the PGA Tour has called the LPGA commissioner and asked for help. And he said, well, I do need your help. He said, we want to build a golf course at the World Golf Hall of Fame. And we want to call it the King and the Bear. And we want Jack and Arnie to design it. But I can't get them to even consider doing that. And I said, well, why not? Well, I don't know. They say they're too busy and they design courses differently. And he said, you probably know him better than anybody. Would you give him a call and talk to him? So I probably spent 3 or 4 meetings with each of them, unsuccessfully convincing them that they should jointly design this course. Well, got nowhere. So finally I had a brainstorm and I said, okay, guys, if you're not interested in doing it, I hope you'll enjoy playing the Player Trevino course. And they looked at me, the what? And I said, I hope you'll enjoy playing the Gary Player Lee Trevino course. And they said, what do you mean? I said, you don't think he's going to, if you turn him down, he's not going to build a golf course. He's going to build a golf course that will feature 2 of the other great players. Well, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 days when ground was broken on the King and the Bear. So it was a brainstorm that I had that could have backfired, but didn't. So those are the kinds of stories, and there are a lot of them in the book. But rather than go any further, I'd be delighted to answer any questions or comments that any of you might have.
Charlie, this is Bern. And I want to, first of all, thank you for being with us tonight. And second of all, commend you for balancing those probably very delicate conversations regarding 2 very competitive golf Hall of Famers.
Yes.
So, I have interest in your LPGA career and where the LPGA is now. It's incredible. We're having just as much fun watching the ladies whack the ball and score as the guys. Can you give us a little feel and flavor as to how it was and a little bit about the transition to the present?
When I joined the tour in 1990, we had 46 events all over the United States. Only had 2 or 3 in Europe or Asia. And of course, there are quite a few there now. Since then, a lot of good things have happened, and a lot of people have played a role in it. The main thing, I think, however, is that the caliber of play is so good and getting better. There was a time, I wouldn't even guess what time range it was, but there was a time when there might have been 15 or 20 female players that could really play at a really professional level. The other players weren't poor; they just weren't as good. Today, I would say there are at least 60 or 70, maybe 80 or 90 players that can play very, very well. And I guess it's no different than any other product. If the product is good, all the other problems sort of fall away. If the product is not good, no amount of marketing or money in the world is going to help. So I think that's the primary reason. You got more good players and a strong number of truly great players.
Thank you.
I wanted to jump in and just ask a question. I know the answer, but I thought you guys would find this illuminating. Dad, I know that one of the questions you get asked a lot is how did Arnie and Jack like each other? Did they get along? How did their wives get along? Were they close friends?
They were extremely close friends. Of course, in the early days, and some of you guys are old enough to remember, the early days when Jack challenged the king were not all pleasant. The gallery got pretty ugly, called him Fat Jack and yelled when he applauded when he hit a bad shot. But I think the key was neither Arnie or Jack paid any attention to that. They handled it like true gentlemen. In fact, Jack said, I think it may have been at the memorial service in Latrobe. He said, I never had trouble with Arnie. I had some trouble with Arnie's army. So as the years went by, I think they gained increasing respect for one another. And by the end of their lives, I think they were about as close as any two people could be. And if you read in my book, near the end of the book is a section of from Jack's talk at Arnie's memorial service. Read that and you'll understand why I say they were very good friends. And by the way, their wives were very close. Winnie Palmer, who sadly passed away, and Barbara Nicklaus were very good friends. And I've always said, I think if that friendship between Arnie and Jack had ever started to go sour, those two gals would have pulled those guys aside and say, grow up, act like a gentleman. It never happened happily, but if it had, I'm sure they would have straightened it out. So I think that's really, I can't say many times more forcibly, they were very, very close.
Commissioner, this is Renee Powell. How are you?
Renee. I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. And I just want to say that you, as every one of the LPGA Tour players, loved you. And you were just the best commissioner that we've had. So thank you for all that you've done in really advancing the LPGA at the time that you did. And you're just terrific.
Renee, it's people like you who really make the game great. What you've done against, I know, a lot of odds is absolutely unbelievable. So I appreciate your comments more than you would ever know. I think if I had any success in my LPGA days, it's because I truly respected and loved the players. And I think they knew it. If you're leading an organization, if those who are following you don't really think you care about them, you're going to have trouble. These gals knew I liked them, I cared about them, and I wanted to do everything I could to help them succeed. So thank you for those very kind words. It was a labor of love for me, and Marilyn, my wife, helped me every step of the way, and we both had a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mechem, a question from John Capers. The LPGA Hall of Fame has just changed the rules, which I think was for the better, that allowed Lorena Ochoa to get in. And they brought in the other 9 original founders of the LPGA who had not been in under the previous rulings. Do you think it's acceptable now, or should there be more changes to the criteria to get into the LPGA Hall?
I think the current changes bring it to where it ought to be. For a long time, it was really far below what it ought to be. It was too hard to get in. Frankly, and I think I'm right about this, one of the reasons it was hard to change is that some of the older players resisted change because they were so proud of having made it. But I think they failed to realize how the game changed. But once they began to, then they became very supportive. So, John, I think, to answer your question very concisely, I think it's exactly where it ought to be. And Lorena is the best proof that it's doing good things.
Charlie, Gordon Beggs out in Tucson, Arizona. And I just wanted to hear your comment on Lorena being admitted to the Hall of Fame, because I can't imagine anybody who could deserve it more than she did based on her many years of spectacular play.
She, if she made a mistake, she quit too soon. And we all know she did it for all the right reasons. She wanted to be with her family and so on. But she sort of disappeared from view for a while. And it's wonderful that she's now back in the limelight. No one deserved it more.
This is John Douglas checking in. Charlie, we think of Arnie spending a lot of time at Bay Hill and a lot of time up in the Latrobe, but I know he had some special times with you at the Tradition. I was fortunate enough actually to meet you both out there. Perhaps are there any Tradition stories in your book?
A lot of them. Arnie lived next door to where my wife and I lived, and we still live there. And Kit Palmer, his wife, spends 3 or 4 months a year there. Every morning, I would bring him the local paper and a cup of Starbucks, and in the evening, we would have a Kettle One and a little bit of cheese and crackers and have a good time. So we saw a lot of them. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories, though, about Tradition. I had a good friend, he's still living here, named Dan Dutton. And Dan said to me one day, Charlie, I'd love to have a drink with Arnie. And I said, well, look, come down any afternoon, maybe 4:30 or so, and we'll have a drink. So Dan showed up and sits down, and Arnie knew Dan, but didn't know him real well. And Dan owned a winery and was very much a wine connoisseur. So Arnie said, Dan, what do you have to drink? And Dan said, I think I'd like a Merlot. And Arnie looked at him straight away and said, I said, what do you want to drink? Never forget that one. One of my favorites. There are a lot of stories in it about Tradition. Well, I've taken a lot of your time. I would urge you to read the book. I think you'll find it interesting and a lot of laughs. I like to laugh, and I put a lot of laughs in it.
Yeah.
So, Dan and everybody, thank you for your time.
Hey, Charlie, this is John Rusbosson. Charlie?
Yes.
This is John Rusbosson. Can I ask you a couple questions?
Sure.
One, I want to thank you for breaking the secret. I didn't tell everyone we're going to have a case of your autographed books at the June 27th event. So You spilled the beans. Thank you.
Okay.
the other thing I want to share, a lot of folks don't realize you raised Dan, your family in Cincinnati, about 60 miles south of where the Golf Heritage Society started in 1970. And in a few months in the fall, we're having our national convention in Indianapolis. And who knows if you or Dan had connections that could help us get sponsorships from the Cincy area. But I just want to thank you both for joining the society. And when Dan told me you were going to write a book about Arnie and Jack, I said, that's a wonderful idea. And to see it come to fruition is amazing. And having you part of the GHS is rewarding to me, and I think many of our members. So again, thanks for the participation. And could you share just a little bit about the Palmer Restaurant Museum for our members?
Palmer Restaurant was a dream of Arnold's. He wanted very much to have a restaurant. My wife and I used to laugh that he always said, but don't make it more than 5 minutes away, because he knew he wanted to get home quickly when he was done. It's a wonderful restaurant. Was when it started, still is. And there are a lot of stories in the book about the restaurant. The one story I will tell you is one day Jack Nicklaus called me and said, hey, I'm in town in Palm Springs, La Quinta, and can we have dinner tonight? And I said, yeah. He said, where should we go? And I kidded him and I said, well, we could go to Arnold's restaurant if you could stand a bad meal. And he said, no, I'm not worried about that. So we went, and they shook hands and we all had a drink. And then Arnie said, Jack, I want to show you around this place. So imagine this, the restaurant is full, 300 or 400 people. These two guys walk through the restaurant totally unannounced. People were spilling their drinks, dropping silverware on the floor. They were flabbergasted with what they were seeing. I've never, ever forgotten that. It's a great restaurant. I hope if you're ever in the Palm Springs area, you will visit. And by the way, there's a lot of stories in the book about Palmer's restaurant. So,
yeah. Well, thank you guys. I want to thank you as well. It's been an honor. It really has. And John, I know we'll redouble our efforts to help you in Ohio and in Cincinnati, to help further the cause. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dad. And this is a rare treat, I think, to hear from him. And we enjoyed it.
So Dan and Charlie, I can't thank you guys enough for who you are and your willingness to share with all of us. That is just so gracious of you. I had an idea. Perhaps you guys can arrange it, fix it, so that we can do a local Zoom from within inside the restaurant and see some of the memorabilia.
Sure.
We understand that it is quite loaded. And if we can arrange for a guided tour, that will become a matter of GHS Golf Heritage Society archive record as well. I think it will be worth having on a Zoom call.
We can do that, can't we, Dan?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. There is a small fee of $1 million.
We covered. We got it.
I do want to say that that's the way to do it, because to talk about it doesn't do it justice. But when you see it in a Zoom call, it'll be wonderful. And as I say, there's a lot of stories in the book. You'll see those as well.
That's great. That's great. So we consider ourselves invited. We really consider ourselves very fortunate, both for your gracious willingness to be with us tonight and for the amazing careers that you've both had and share with us. Can't wait to put my hands on the book.
Right.
I don't know how many people are on this call, but I appreciate your willingness to listen, and I've enjoyed it a lot.
I'm just glad there was a doctor in the house.
Okay.
Oh,
Buzz
good.
has a question. Buzz has a question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's do one more.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Mechem. Great, entertaining conversation this evening. I'm curious where you played your golf in Cincinnati, and if you had any comments about the Cincinnati courses.
Camargo is where I played. It's a 1925 Seth Rayner gem. There are a lot of good golf courses in Cincinnati. Clover Nook and Macatiwa and Lasantaville, but I'm prejudiced. Pete Dye once was quoted as saying that when he was asked to name the 3 or 4 best courses in the world, Camargo was one of them.
And actually, Dad had Jack Nicklaus to Camargo several times. Yeah.
Yep. So that's where I belong, and I may not be able to play there much anymore, but that I'm very proud to have been a part of it. In my mind, it's not one of the great courses in Cincinnati or Ohio, but in the world. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Our tradition is to stay on if you feel like it and chit chat a bit. It's part of being in society. Dan, thanks so much. Great job.
Okay. Thank you. Talk soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dan.
I like Dan's library. I showed it to Deb. I have no problems in the future.
They're both gone, but I just wanted to show you guys. This is a salt shaker. It says Arnold salt. They have these at Latrobe, but mine is from Palmer's Restaurant in La Quinta. And when you buy these, you have to buy the pair, salt and pepper. And Kevin and I were having dinner there one night with this other couple. I said, oh, I'd really love the salt, the Arnold salt. And she said, well, I'd really love the pepper. So we bought the pair and we split them. And so mine is from California.
When you host something, usually afterwards you go to bed and you realize you missed a couple things. Well, 2 things that I want to try to make up for while we're still on and together and recording. First of all, John Capers, past president, thank you so much for opening your doors at Marion to host us. It's really an opportunity. I've been there, and it just blows you away to be among all of those memorabilia, but to have access to a real asset like that is amazing. So thank you for creating that opportunity, John. And the other person that I saw on did not get a chance to greet personally was Howdy Giles. I think Kevin took care of that a little bit, but I wanted to shout out and say hello to Howdy. I know Howdy. He will be with us at Latrobe, and I hope he brings a ton of his books as well. It'll be great. The King and I.
It was great being with you at the PGA show, Bern.
It was great to meet you, Howdy, and hear a few stories. Wish I had 2 more hours to sit there in a Kettle One to enjoy it with you.
Absolutely. And John, I want to thank you for getting me involved in this.
You're welcome, Howdy. And Taba will like to get to know you better with your drinking of Kettle One. That was a great idea with her and Glenn had. And you know how much Arnie enjoyed his Kettle One.
Kettle One with a twist.
I got asked in Latrobe said, I said, I need a glass of water. And they said, you want water or Arnie's water? And I asked what the difference was, and I quickly found out.
And you got it.
We always have fun. We always have fun. So when people look at these Zoom calls and recordings, the members just appreciate the fact that they can, catch up with us, and potential new members. We're going to start putting these out on YouTube one at a time for maybe a week or so at a time to build a membership drive, and they'll know basically how we have fun, and they'll know how connected we are, and they'll know that we like Kettle One.
Especially as Arnie's on it. Well done, John.
So I just wanted to say, I know Howdy, and I bought his book and he signed it to me when we were actually in Delaware, Kevin and I. And another time, we've seen Howdy many times in Florida, but we were on our way to his party during one of the PGA shows. And we're looking around for a place to park to go to his party. And we nearly run somebody over. And we're like, oh, sorry. Who was it? It was Arnold Palmer out walking his dog. We said, sorry. We're just on our way to Howdy's. He said, well, why wasn't I invited? But I'm sure that Arnold was always invited. But anyway, so that's another Arnold Palmer story and a Howdy Giles story. So hi, Howdy.
That's a good story, Taba. And my middle name is Who, because somebody say, I'm a friend of Howdy's. You go, Howdy who?
Oh,
Good story, Taba.
it's good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Hey, so the other author who's on the call that I know about is Chris Roadell. Chris will likely be there and likely be able to share a story or two and sign a book or two. So, Chris, if you're still on the line, we'd hope that you'd come to Indianapolis and be present. Of course, we hope to see you at Lake Trobe in June. Yeah, ahead of time.
Ernie, here's a copy of Howdy's book, The King and I. For those
Fantastic.
of you that aren't familiar with it.
You can spend a very nice time paging through, reading some stories, and just how close these people were as friends and respectful of each other. It speaks to the nature of the relationships when you hear about Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, and their associates. Obviously, tonight we learned that they hang with great people.
Amen.
It was 73 in Pittsburgh today, so I was sort of in absentia playing with the hickory sticks. So I'm going to take my leave, wish everyone a good evening, and thank you all, especially to George for Zooming us tonight, and for Bob Geddes for announcing us tonight, and for everybody who's participating to support the Golf Heritage Society. Thank you, one and all.